toward a world government out of my latter years. A conversation I had with three students of the University of Chicago has made a strong impression on me. It showed me that a sense of responsibility and initiative is at work in the young generation of this country. These students are aware of the fact that the destiny of the new generation will be decided in these few years. They are determined to influence the path of events within the framework of their possibilities. What is the situation? The development of technology and of the implements of war has brought about something akin to a shrinking of our planet. Economic interlinking has made the destinies of nations interdependent to a degree far greater than in previous years. The available weapons of destruction are of a kind such that no place on earth is safeguarded against sudden total destruction. The only hope for protection lies in the securing of peace in a supranational way. A world government must be created which is able to solve conflicts between nations by judicial decision. This government must be based on a clear-cut constitution which is approved by the governments and the nations and which gives it the sole disposition of offensive weapons. A person or a nation can be considered peace-loving only if it ready to cede its military force to the international authorities and to renounce every attempt or even the means of achieving its interest brought by the use of force. It is apparent that the development of political relations in the year which has elapsed since the conclusion of the Second World War has brought us in no way nearer to the achievement of this goal. The United Nations, as it stands today, has neither the military force nor the legal basis to bring about a state of international security, nor does it take account of the actual distribution of power. Real power is at present in the hands of few. It is no exaggeration to say that the solution of the real problem is linked solely to an agreement on a grand scale between this country and Russia. For if such an agreement will be achieved, then these two powers alone will be able to cause the other nations to give up their sovereignty to the degree necessary for the establishment of military security for all. No one will say that fundamental agreement with Russia is impossible under the present circumstances. Such a statement will be justified if the United States had made a serious attempt to this direction during the past year. I found, however, that the opposite has happened. There was no need to accept fascist Argentina into the United Nations against Russia's opposition. There was no need to manufacture new atomic bombs without let up to appropriate $12 billion for defense in a year in which no military threat was to be expected for the nearest future. Nor was it necessary to delay the proposed measures against Franco Spain. It is senseless to recount here the details which all show that nothing has been done in order to alleviate Russia's distrust, a distrust which can very well be understood in the light of the events of the last decades, and to whose origin we have contributed no little. A permanent peace cannot be prepared by treats, but only by the honest attempts to create mutual trust. One should think that the wish to create a decent form of life on this planet and to avert the danger of unspeakable destruction will tame the passions of responsible man. You can't rely. You can't rely on that, my young friends. May you succeed in activating the young generation in this sense, so that it will strive for a policy of peace on a grand scale. Thus you can not only defend yourself successfully, but you can serve your country and your descendants in a degree as was not given to any previous generations. The way out. 22. The construction of the atom bomb has brought about the effect that all the people living in cities are threatened everywhere and constantly with sudden destruction. There is no doubt that this condition has to be abolished if man is to prove himself worthy, at least to some extent, of the self-chosen name of Homo sapiens. However, there still exist widely divergent opinions concerning the degree to which traditional social and political forms historically developed will have to be sacrificed in order to achieve the desired security. After the First World War, we were confronted with a paradoxical situation regarding the solution of international conflicts. An international court of justice had been established for a peaceful solution of these conflicts on the basis of international law. Furthermore, a political instrument for securing peace by means of international negotiation in a sort of world parliament had been created in the form of the League of Nations. The nations united in the League had further outlawed as criminal the method of solving conflicts by means of war. Thus, the nations were imbued with an illusion of security that led inevitably to bitter disappointment. For the best court of justice is meaningless unless it is backed by the authority and power to execute its decisions, and exactly the same thing is true of a world parliament. An individual state with sufficient military and economic power can easily resort to violence and voluntarily destroy the entire structure of, of of supranational security built on nothing but words and documents. Moral authority alone is an inadequate means of securing the peace. The United Nations organization is now in the process of being tested. It may eventually emerge as the agency of security without illusion that we so badly need, but it has not as yet gone beyond the area of moral authority, as in my opinion it must. Our situation is rendered more acute by other circumstances, only two of which will be presented here. So long as the individual state, despite its official condemnation of war, has to consider the possibility of engaging in war, it must influence and educate its citizens and its youth, in particular in such a way that they can easily be converted into efficient soldiers in the event of war. Therefore, this is complete not only to cultivate a technical military training and type of thinking, but also to implant a spirit of national vanity in its people in order to secure their inner readiness for the outbreak of war. Of course, this kind of education counteracts all endeavors to establish moral authority for any supranational security organization. The danger of war in our time is further heightened by another technical factor. Modern weapons, in particular the atom bomb, have led to a considerable advantage in the means of offense or attack over those of defense. And this could well bring about the result that even responsible statesmen might find themselves compelled to wage a preventive war. In view of these evident facts, there is, in my opinion, only one way out. It is necessary that conditions be established that guarantee the individual state the right to solve its conflicts with other states on a legal basis and under international jurisdiction. It is necessary that the individual state be prevented from making war by a supranational organization supported by a military power that is exclusively under its control. Only when these two conditions have been fully met can we have some assurance that we shall not vanish into the atmosphere, dissolved into atoms, one of these days. From the viewpoint of the political mentality prevailing at present, it may seem illusory, even fantastic, to hope for the realization of such conditions within a period of a few years. Yet, the realization can't wait for a gradual historical development to take its course. For so long as we do not achieve supranational military security, the above-mentioned factors can always and forcibly lead us into war. Even more than the will for power, the fear of sudden attack will prove to be disastrous for us if we do not openly and decisively meet the problem of the depriving national spheres of power of their military strength, turning such power over to a supranational authority. With due consideration for the difficulties involved in this task, I have no doubt about one point. We shall be able to solve the problem when it will be clearly evident to all that there is no other, no cheaper way out of the present situation. Now I feel it's my obligation to say something about the individual steps which might lead to a solution of the security problem. 1. Mutual inspection by the leading military powers of methods and installations used for the production of offensive weapons, combined with an interchange of pertinent technical and scientific discoveries, will diminish fear and distrust, at least for the time being. In the breathing spell thus provided, we would have to prepare more thorough measures. For this preliminary step should be taken with conscious awareness that the ultimate goal is the denationalization of military power altogether. This first step is necessary to make any successive moves possible. However, we should be wary of believing that its execution would immediately result in security. There still would remain the possibility of an armament race with regard to a possible future war, and there always exists the temptation to resort once more by underground methods to the military secret, that is, keeping secret the knowledge about methods and means of an actual preparations for warfare. Real security is tied to the denationalization of military power. 2. This denationalization can be prepared through a steadily increasing interchange of military and scientific technical personnel among the armies of the different nations. The interchange should follow a carefully elaborated plan aimed at converting the national army systematically into a supranational military force. A national army, one might say, is the last place where national feeling may be expected to weaken. Even so, the nationalism can be progressively immunized at a rate proportionate, at least, to the building of the supranational army, and the whole process can be facilitated by integrating it with the recruiting and training of the latter. The process of interchanging personnel would further lessen the danger of surprise attacks and in itself would lay the psychological foundation for internationalization of military resources. Simultaneously, the strongest military powers could draft the working papers for a supranational security organization and for an arbitration committee, as well as the legal basis for and the precise stipulation of obligations, competencies, and restrictions of the latter with respect to the individual nations. They could further decide upon the terms of election for establishing and maintaining these bodies. When an agreement on this point shall have been reached, a guarantee against wars of worldwide dimensions can be assured. 3. The above named bodies can now begin to function. The vestiges of national armies can then be either disbanded or placed under the high command of the supranational authority. 4. After the cooperation of the nations of highest military importance has been secured, the attempt should be made to incorporate, if possible, all nations into the supranational organization, provided that it is their voluntary decision to join. This outline may perhaps create the impression that the presently prevailing military powers are to be assigned to dominate a role. I have tried, however, to present the problem with a view to a sufficiently swift realization that will allow us to avoid difficulties greater than those already inherent in the nature of such a task. It may be simpler, of course, to reach preliminary agreements among the strongest military powers than among all nations, big and small, for a body of representatives of all nations is a hopelessly clumsy instrument for the speedy achievement of even preliminary results. Even so, the task confronting us requires of all concerned the utmost sagacity and tolerance, which can be achieved only through awareness of the harsh necessity we have to face. 23. On receiving the one-word award, I am greatly touched by the signal honor which you have wished to confer upon me. In the course of my long life, I have received from my fellow man far more recognition than I deserve, and I confess that my sense of shame has always outweighed my pleasure therein, but never on any previous occasion has the pain so far outweighed the pleasure as now. For all of us who are concerned for peace and the triumph of reason and justice must today be keenly aware how small an influence reason and honest goodwill exert upon events in the political field. But however that may be, and whatever fate may have in store for us, yet we may rest assured that without the tireless efforts of those who are concerned with the welfare of humanity as a whole, the lot of mankind will be still worse than in fact it even now is. In this time of decisions so heavy with fate, what we must say to our fellow citizens seems above all to be this: where belief in the omnipotence of physical force gets the upper hand in political life, this force takes on a life of its own, and proves stronger than the men who think to use force as a tool. The proposed militarization of the nation not only immediately threatens us with war, it will also slowly but surely destroy the democratic spirit and the dignity of the individual in our land. The assertion that events abroad force us to arm is wrong. We must combat it with all our strength. Actually, our own rearmament through the action of other nations to it will bring about that very situation on which its advocates seek to base their proposals. There is only one path to peace and security, the path of supranational organization. One-sided armament, one national basis only heightens the general uncertainty and confusion without being an effective protection. Science and civilization. It is in times of economic distress, such as we experience everywhere today, one sees very clearly the strength of the moral forces that live in a people. Let us hope that a historian delivering judgment in some future period, when Europe is politically and economically united, will be able to say that in our days the liberty and honor of this continent was saved by its western nations, which stood fast in hard times against the temptation of hatred and oppressions, and that Western Europe defended successfully the liberty of the individual, which has brought us every advance of knowledge and invention, liberty, without which life to self-respecting man is not worth living. It can't be my task today to act as a judge of the conduct of a nation, which for many years has considered me as her own. Perhaps it is an idle task to judge in times when action counts. Today the questions which concern us are how can we save mankind and its spiritual acquisitions of which we are the heirs? How can one save Europe from a new disaster? It can't be doubted that the world crisis and the suffering and privations of the people resulting from the crisis are in some measure responsible for the dangerous upheavals of which we are the witness. In such periods, discontent breeds hatred, and hatred leads to acts of violence and revolution, and often even to war. Thus distress and evil produce new distress and new evil. Again, the leading statesmen are burdened with tremendous responsibilities, just the same as 20 years ago. May they succeed through timely agreement to establish a condition of unity and clarity of international obligations in Europe, so that for every state a warlike adventure must appear as utterly hopeless. But the work of statesmen can succeed only if they are backed by the serious and determined will of the people. We are concerned not merely with the technical problem of securing and maintaining peace, but also with the important task of education and enlightenment. If we want to resist the powers which threaten to suppress intellectual and individual freedom, we must keep clearly before us that what is at stake and what we owe to that freedom which our ancestors have won for us after hard struggles. Without such freedom, there would have been no Shakespeare, no Goethe, no Newton, no Faraday, no Pasteur, and no Lister. There would be no comfortable houses for the mass of the people, no railway, no wireless, no protection against epidemics, no cheap books, no culture, and no enjoyment of art for all. There would be no machines to relieve the people from the arduous labor needed for the production of the essential necessities of life, Most people would lead a dual life of slavery, just as under the ancient despotisms of Asia. It is only men who are free, who create the inventions and intellectual works which to us moderns make life worthwhile. Without doubt, the present economic difficulties will eventually bring us to the point where the balance between supply of labor and demand of labor, between production and consumption, will be enforced by law. But even this problem we shall solve as free men, and we shall not allow ourselves for its sake to be driven into slavery, which ultimately would bring with it stagnation of every healthy development. In this connection, I should like to give expression to an idea which has occurred to me recently. I lived in solitude in the country and noticed how the monotony of a quiet life stimulates the creative mind. There are certain callings in our in our in our in our modern organization which entail such an isolated life without making a great claim on bodily and intellectual effort. I think of such occupation as the service in lighthouses and lightships. Would it not be possible to fill such places with young people who wish to think out scientific problems, especially of a mathematical or philosophical nature? Very few of such people have the opportunity during the most productive period of their lives to devote themselves undisturbed for for any length of time to scientific problems. Even if a young person is lucky enough to obtain a scholarship for a short period, he must endeavor to arrive as quickly as possible at definite conclusions that can't be of advantage in the pursuit of pure science. The young scientist who carries on an ordinary practical profession which maintains him is in a much better position, assuming, of course, that this profession leaves him with sufficient spare time and energy. In this way, perhaps a greater number of creative individuals could be given an opportunity for mental development than is possible at present. In these times of economic depression and political upheaval, such consideration seem to be worth attention. Shall we worry over the fact that we are living in a time of danger and want? I think not. Man, like every other animal, is by nature indolent. If nothing spurs him on, then he will hardly think and will behave from habit like an automaton. I am no longer young and can therefore say that as a child and as a young man is experienced that phase when a young man thinks only about the trivialities of personal existence and talks like his fellows and behaves like them. Only with difficulty can one see what is really behind such a conventional mask. For owing to habit and speech, his real personality is as it were wrapped in cotton wool. How different it is today! In the lightning flashes of our tempestuous times, one sees human beings and thinks in their nakedness. Every nation and every human being reveal clearly their aims, powers, and weaknesses, and also their passions. Routine becomes of no avail under the swift change of conditions. Conventions fall away like dry husks. Men in their distress begin to think about the failure of economic practice and about the necessity of political combination which are supranational. Only through perils and upheavals can nations Be proud to further developments. May the present upheavals lead to a better world. Above and beyond this valuation of our time, we have this further duty to care for what is eternal and highest amongst our possessions, that which gives to life its import and which we wish to hand to our children purer and richer than we received it from our forebears. A message to intellectuals. We meet today as intellectuals and scholars of many nationalities with a deep and historic responsibility placed upon us. We have every reason to be grateful to our French and Polish colleagues whose initiative has assembled us here for a momentous objective to use the influence of wise men in promoting peace and security throughout the world. This is the age-old problem with which Plato, as one of the first, struggled so hard to apply reason and prudence to the solution of man's problems, instead of yielding to atavist instincts and passions. By painful experience, we have learned that rational thinking does not suffice to solve the problems of our social life. Penetrating research and keen scientific work have often had tragic implications for mankind, producing, on the one hand, inventions which liberated man from exhausting physical labor, making his life easier and richer, but on the other hand, introducing a grave restlessness into his life, making him a slave to his technological environment, and most catastrophic of all, creating the means for his own mass destruction. This indeed is a tragedy of overwhelming poignancy. However poignant that tragedy is, it is perhaps even more tragic that while mankind has produced many scholars so extremely successful in the field of science and technology, we have been for a long time so inefficient in finding adequate solutions in the many political conflicts and economic tensions which beset us. No doubt, the antagonism of economic interests within and among nations is largely responsible to a great extent for the dangerous and threatening condition in the world today. Man has not succeeded in developing political and economic forms of organization which would guarantee the peaceful coexistence of the nations of the world. He has now succeeded in building the kind of system which would eliminate the possibility of war and banish forever the murderous instruments of mass destruction. We scientists, whose tragic destination has been to help in making the methods of annihilation more gruesome and more effective, must consider it our solemn and transcendent duty to do all in our power in preventing these weapons from being used for the brutal purpose for which they were invented. What else could possibly be more important for us? What social aim could be closer to our hearts? That is why this Congress has such a vital mission. We are here to take counsel with each other. We must build spiritual and scientific bridges linking the nations of the world. We must overcome the horrible obstacles of national frontiers. In the smaller entities of community life, man has made some progress toward breaking down antisocial sovereignties. This is true, for example, of life within cities and, to a certain degree, even of society within individual states. In such communities, tradition and education have had a more moderating influence and have brought about tolerable relations among the peoples living within those confines. But in a relation among separate states, complete anarchy still prevails. I do not believe that we have made any genuine advantage in this area during the last few thousand years. All too frequently, conflicts among nations are still being decided by brutal power, by war. The unlimited desire forever greater, forever greater power seeks to become active and aggressive wherever and whenever the physical possibility offers itself. Throughout the ages, the state of anarchy in international affairs has inflicted indescribable suffering and destruction upon mankind. Again and again, it has deprived the development of man, their souls, and their well-being. For a given time, it has almost annihilated whole areas. However, the desire of nations to be constantly prepared for warfare has, however, still other repercussions upon the lives of man. The power of every state over its citizens has grown steadily during the last few hundred years, no less in countries where the power of the state has been exercised wisely than in those where it has been used for brutal tyranny. The function of the state to maintain peaceful and ordered relations among and between its citizens has become increasingly complicated and extensive largely because of the concentration and centralization of the modern industrial apparatus. In order to protect its citizens from attacks from without, a modern state requires a formidable expanding military establishment. In addition, the state considers it necessary to educate its citizens for the possibilities of war, an education not only corrupting to the soul and spirit of the young, but also adversely affecting the mentality of adults. No country can avoid this corruption. It pervades the citizenry even in countries which do not harbor outspoken, aggressive tendencies. The state has thus become a modern idol whose suggestive power few men are able to escape. Education for war, however, is a delusion. The technological developments of the last few years have created a completely new military situation. Horrible weapons have been invented capable of capable of destroying in a few seconds huge masses of human beings and tremendous areas of territory. Since science has not yet found protection from these weapons, the modern state is no longer in a position to prepare adequately for the safety of its citizens. How then shall we be saved? Mankind can only gain protection against the danger of an unimaginable destruction and wanton annihilation if a supranational organization has alone the authority to produce or possess these weapons. It is unthinkable, however, that nations under existing conditions would hand over such authority to a supranational organization unless the organization would have the legal right and duty to solve all the conflicts which in the past have led to war. The functions of individual states would be to concentrate more or less upon internal affairs. In the relation with other states, They would deal only with issues and problems which are in no way conducive to endangering international security. Unfortunately, there are no indications that governments yet realize that the situation in which mankind finds itself makes the adoption of revolutionary measures a compelling necessity. Our situation is not comparable to anything in the past. It is impossible, therefore, to apply methods and measures which at an earlier age might have been sufficient. We must revolutionize our thinking, revolutionize our actions, and must have the courage to revolutionize relations among the nations of the world. Cliché of yesterday will no longer do today, and will no doubt be hopelessly out of date tomorrow. To bring this home to men all over the world is the most important and most faithful social function intellectuals have ever had to shoulder. Will they have enough courage to overcome their own national ties to the extent that is necessary to induce the peoples of the world to change their deep-rooted national traditions in a most radical fashion? A tremendous effort is indispensable. If it fails now, the supranational organization will be built later, but then it will have to be built upon the ruins of a large part of the now existing world. Let us hope that the abolition of the existing international anarchy will not need to be bought by a self-inflicted world catastrophe, the dimension of which no one of us can possibly imagine. The time is terribly short. We must act now if we are to act at all. Open letter to the General Assembly of the United Nations. We are caught in a situation in which every citizen of every country, his children and his life's work, are threatened by the terrible insecurity which reigns in our world today. The progress of technological development has not increased the stability and the welfare of humanity because of our inability to solve the problem of international organization. It has actually contributed to the danger which threaten peace and the very existence of mankind. The delegates of 55 governments meeting in the Second General Assembly of the United Nations undoubtedly will be aware of the fact that during the last 2 years, since the victory over the Axis powers, no appreciable progress has been made either toward the prevention of war or toward agreement in specific fields such as control of atomic energy and economic cooperation in the reconstruction of war-devastated areas. The United Nations can't be blamed for these failures. No international organization can be stronger than the constitutional powers given it, or than its component parts want it to be. As a matter of fact, the United Nations is an extremely important and useful institution provided the peoples and governments of the world realize that it is merely a transitional system toward the final goal, which is the establishment of a supranational authority vested with sufficient legislative and executive powers to keep the peace. The present impasse lies in the fact that there is no sufficient reliable supranational authority. Thus, the responsibilities of all governments are obliged to act on the assumption of eventual war. Every step motivated by that assumption contributes to the general fear and distrust and hastens the final catastrophe. However strong national armaments may be, they do not create military security for any nation, nor do they guarantee the maintenance of peace. There can never be complete agreement on international control and the administration of atomic energy or on general disarmament until there is a modification of the traditional concept of national sovereignty. For as long as atomic energy and armaments are considered a vital part of national security,